Imagine you're stuck out at sea with nature and the gods against you, and man, you just really want to get home. Alright, let's make it happen. Here's how to survive the Odyssey. Hello Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, the show that just desperately wants to get home to the subscribe button. It's a special day, my friends, one where we once again are about to embark on an adventure with one of the biggest directors working today, Christopher Nolan. This dude's done everything from an interstellar space adventure, to a magical mystery, to a superhero crime thriller, to a drama about building nukes, and now he's tackling epic fantasy with his adaptation of the Odyssey. Now, the film's made some interesting choices so far. I personally love how the armor looks, even if it's not period accurate, though the dialogue and accent choices did kinda take me out of it.
They're pining for a daddy.
If you somehow don't know about one of the oldest stories ever told, the Odyssey is a Greek epic about, well, Odysseus. He's the king of Ithaca and just really wants to get home to his wife and son, and I mean, man, who can blame him? We love Anne Hathaway in this house. Odysseus' journey actually started out all the way back in Troy, in what is now modern-day Turkey. You know that whole Trojan War thing with the Trojan horse? You know, they made a whole movie about it. Just looking at a map here, it doesn't seem like it should take very long to actually get back to Ithaca. It's only a trip of about 560 nautical miles. If you were traveling at a consistent 4 knots, or about 4.6 miles per hour, 7.4 kilometers an hour, that would only take about 140 hours, just 6 days. But through various detours, delays, debauchery, tomfoolery, and shenanigans, it takes Odysseus over 10 years to get home. A whole decade! So today, I want to do a little thought experiment, loyal theorists. 10 years is a long time not to hang out with my cool wife, son, and dog, especially with Robert Pattinson being all creepy in my house. So, what if we got sucked into the Odyssey? What if we were taken back in time and actually had to go through this journey ourselves? I mean, hey, Christopher Nolan does like to do things practically. Can we make a guide for the best way to survive this journey and maybe get home just a little bit quicker than Matt Damon does? Hop in this horse and push it up to the city gates, loyal theorists. Here's your Film Theory approved guide on how to survive the Odyssey. So first things first, without modern tech like GPSs or whatever, how would they handle long voyages like this in ancient Greece? Well, it would be with a combination of 3 separate techniques. The first was actually pretty simple. Just use the coast as a visual navigation reference. It's pretty self-explanatory, just to hug the coast and use a map to verify what you see, though this does come with a couple of big downsides. Weather like fog, or storms, or even just nightfall could make it hard to actually see what you're referencing, and the closer you get to the coast, the more danger you have of a surprise attack from a rock formation on the sea floor, something that's still happening today. A cruise ship tragically hit some rocks in 2012 and resulted in the deaths of 32 people right off the Mediterranean island of Giglio. Odysseus didn't visit that exact island, but did sail in this area, so it's definitely something he'd need to worry about. Though let's be real, if Zeus is blowing you out into the open ocean away from the coast, you're gonna need to use one of the other techniques. The second method is known as Dead Reckoning, and this isn't a Tom Cruise movie. It's more like an educated guess. You take your previous known location, your heading, time traveled, and speed, and then you just kind of estimate where you are. However, this does have a huge drawback. Let's say it takes 1 day to get from Greek Island 1 to Greek Island 2, but you don't see Greek Island 2 at the end of the day. Well, then you know that your heading was wrong, and now you have no idea where you are. Yeah, Dead Reckoning can be affected by winds, currents, small navigational errors, and the wrath of pissed off gods. So by the time you realize you messed up, you might as well be Matt Damon in The Martian. Which brings us to method number 3, and the one that would have been the most accurate for Odysseus: star charting. And hey, this one is actually used in the story itself. Yep, the goddess Calypso instructs Odysseus to look for the bear in the sky, but she isn't talking about a literal bear. She's talking about the constellation Ursa Major. To get home, Odysseus needed to keep Ursa Major on the same side of his boat the entire time, which might sound crazy, but it's not. You see, Ursa Major is close to the star called Polaris, also known as the North Star. Yeah, you know, the star that's always going to be in the northern sky, so you can use it like a makeshift compass. If you're stuck out at sea and trying to get home to a very specific place in Ithaca, yeah man, having a compass in the sky is going to help you out a lot. The only catch here is that sailing at night is also pretty dangerous. A bad storm, or even just light cloud cover, can completely shield the stars and leave you without your literal and metaphorical metaphorical North Star. So for us to get home, we're going to need to use a combination of all three of these methods. The Aegean Sea has a ton of islands that we can hop to, so we should never be a day away from any landmass. And whenever you can't see the coast, we just switch over to Dead Reckoning or Star Navigation. Then, bing bada boom, we should be home to Anne Hathaway and Tom Holland in no time. Okay, cool. We know how we're gonna set sail, but we also have to lead a fleet of ships full of men who also want to get home. I mean, yeah, the Odyssey was a group project after all. Odysseus actually led a fleet of 12 ships, likely Bronze Age Greek pentaconters. We don't need to go into a ton of nautical ship lore, but across the dozen ships, we likely are gonna have around 600 crewmen, all of whom we're going to need to feed. That's a lot of hungry mouths, guys. Now, while it was common for Greek oarsmen to be responsible for carrying both their own food and water in animal skin bags, that would only really last for like a day or two, maybe more if it was rationed. But thankfully, getting more would actually be fairly simple for these guys. Both fishing and making landfall to hunt would be easy enough. They could also trade with merchants, hope for hospitality from places they visited, or even raid settlements if they got desperate. Fortunately, humans can survive between 1 and 3 weeks without food, so the biggest concern is actually going to be getting fresh water. But there's also a fix for that. Meet the solar still, a tool that the ancient Greeks had. It's pretty simple. You put undrinkable seawater into a container and then a second smaller container inside of that, with the edge of that second container above the seawater. Basically, no seawater should be spilling into it. Cover all of that with a tarp or something similar, and then weigh down that tarp with a rock or a boot or something like that. That lowest point of the tarp should be just over the empty second container, and then just wait. Over time, that seawater should evaporate and then condensate on the tarp, dripping down into the empty container as fresh water. Of course, that might take a while, but you can speed it up with something like a fire, and the whole process would be just sluggish for 600 people. But it is a viable option if things are dire. Okay, so great. Now you know how to get home and how to keep yourself and your men full of food and water while you do it. But unfortunately, the realities of seafaring aren't the only challenges Odysseus and his crew faced during their journey. I mean, it wouldn't be much of an epic if that were the case, right? In fact, they went up against some truly mythical horrors, some of which you only catch glimpses of in the trailers. So what are some strategies to survive against some of the biggest beasts of myth and legend here? Well, first up, we can see a giant whirlpool for a split second in one of the trailers, but at least in the poem, that's not just a whirlpool. It's a giant monster known as Charybdis who sucks water down into her maw, thus creating the whirlpool. Also, yes, this giant sea monster is a lady, by the way, and I expect you to treat her as such. Now, the best strategy here is just going to be trying to avoid to get close enough to get sucked into the whirlpool in the first place, but that might be a problem for another reason we're going to talk about in a second. Either way, giant whirlpools like this can be dangerous. So what do you do if you find yourself in one and don't want to get munched on by the sea monster at the bottom? Well, you're going to need to try to move in the opposite direction of the water flow and prevent as much water as possible from getting caught on the boat. That's just going to weigh you down and submerge more of your boat, making it more likely that you're going to sink. Now, even then, it might be very difficult to escape a whirlpool of this size, but thankfully, it's not going to last forever. Charybdis spits out her water about 3 times a day, so roughly every 8 hours. So if you can manage to keep yourself, your boat, and your crew out of her jaws for that long, that's gonna give you a chance to quickly escape. And then, man, take a nap, because holy heck, you're gonna be tired. Also, that's not gonna help you out as much against a real whirlpool created by like a cave opening on the seabed and filling with water or whatever, but that's gonna last a much shorter time frame anyway. Unfortunately, that wouldn't be the end of the struggle here. Yeah, a giant sea monster swallowing up ships wasn't bad enough. They had to add another monster into the mix with Scylla, a 6-headed serpent that just loves to eat sailors that pass near her cave, which just so happens to be right next to Charybdis. Man, just what a coincidence. Funnily enough, this is actually where the expression caught between a rock and a hard place came from. It evolved from the ancient Greek expression between Scylla and Charybdis, so neat. Anyway, if you sail too close to Scylla to avoid Charybdis, she's known to snatch crewmen from the decks of the ship. Thankfully, the best solution here is probably going to be something pretty simple, like anyone not actively rowing should just be below deck, and if you're going fast enough, hopefully the serpent won't even have that much time to grab anybody. Listen, I know it's not great, but that's better than potentially losing your entire ship and crew to Charybdis. I mean, even the goddess Circe thinks so, recommending to Odysseus that he sail closer to Scylla. So that's 2 of the monster challenges down, hopefully with few, if any, casualties to your crew. So what's next? Well, another monster we see in the trailers is the Cyclops known as Polyphemus. Yeah, during the journey, Odysseus and his crew take refuge in a cave that turns out to be Polyphemus's home, where he chows down on several members of the crew. But unlike Charybdis and Scylla, Polyphemus is someone you're actually going to be able to fight. The Cyclops' two biggest weaknesses were his gluttony and his giant frickin' eyeball. Like I said, he eats, like a lot, so if you got him a gift of food, like a sheep or something like that, he'll likely let his guard down. That will give you an opening to attack his eyeball with an arrow or something like that. In the epic poem, that's actually pretty much how Odysseus overpowers him too. He gets him drunk on a super powerful wine and then stabs him in the eye with a glowing hot wooden stake. Polyphemus was also notoriously kinda dummy thick, as in he actually just was kinda stupid. Yeah, I mean, Odysseus convinced him that his name was Nobody, so after he stabbed his eye, Polyphemus was running around yelling, "Nobody stabbed my eye!" So you're gonna want to use his lack of wit to your advantage too. So alright, that's already a lot of weird stuff to worry about, but these three creatures are only just a handful of the many encountered by Odysseus on his journey. The solutions to a lot of these are pretty self-explanatory and given in the text itself. Like, hey, are you encountering a bunch of sirens that can control you with their magical singing voice? Well, then just plug your ears with beeswax so you can't hear them. Easy peasy. We don't need to go through all of them one by one, and if we did, we'd be here for ages. I mean, there are literal college courses dedicated to the Odyssey like this. So instead, let's go back to some more general strategies to keep yourself and your men safe amongst all of these adventures. For instance, you're probably going to need a way for you and your 12 ships to efficiently communicate with each other before, like, ham radio was a thing, right? You know, so you can warn them about any upcoming whirlpool monsters, six-headed serpents, or singing harpy women. During the day, you can use the reflective surfaces of your shields as a way to communicate. This is actually something ancient Greek soldiers did back in the day, but at night, you're going to have to get a little creative with signal fires. I recommend learning Morse code. I mean, just for anybody, it's a useful skill, and bringing that back to ancient Greek times so you can more efficiently communicate. As for weaponry, I mean, come on, let's be real. Your first thought might be that you want to build a giant cannon for your ship, but it's not like you're going to be able to suddenly build one even with modern knowledge. Most people aren't even going to know where to start. It's going to require a lot of specialized equipment, and man, if you mess up, it's going to have an explosive result. But that being said, there are plenty of things you can apply modern knowledge to with the ingredients of the time. For example, there's a ton of stuff you could mix well in clay pots and then use as weaponry. You know, stuff to use as smoke screens or deterrents. One particularly nasty one you could do is called quicklime, also known as calcium oxide, which is just made by rapidly heating limestone. It releases a smoke that acts as a sort of tear gas when it reacts with water, so stock up on that and suddenly you have a very powerful weapon and defensive tool. Now, when push comes to shove, if you're forced on your own massive Odyssey like this, all of your seafaring knowledge, your ability to outsmart enemies, and tools that you can bring out, all of that, none of it's going to matter in the face of your biggest threat. And that, my friends, is Odysseus's greatest foe, himself. See, most of Odysseus's journey and how long it took is the result of a series of unfortunate decisions the king made that just really pissed off the Greek gods. See, right after finishing up at Troy, Odysseus and his crew didn't just head straight home. No, instead, seeing an opportunity to get some more spoils and supplies, Odysseus took his ships and raided the city stronghold of Kokonus. Now, that probably shouldn't have been that big of a deal. I mean, they were at the end of a war after all. But despite Odysseus warning his men not to get too carried away, they got too carried away. Like literally, they took way too much stuff to even carry, slowing them down, and they were caught on a beach with all of their confiscated goods. They were then hit by a counterattack and lost a lot of men, and to add insult to injury, the big king of the gods, Zeus himself, punished Odysseus and his men for their excess. That's why he blew them wildly off course and sent them on a wild goose chase to begin with. Or maybe that would be a wild Zeus chase? Making Big Daddy Zeus mad is just a bad idea. I mean, he's the god of the gods and has dominion over the sky, so having him against you while you're trying to sail home? Not smart. So you're gonna want to try to make it up to him and get on his good side, right? Zeus is known to be partial for offerings of meat-wrapped thigh bones and is associated with olive leaves. Incorporating that symbology into your fleet probably is going to want to be a priority, to let it be known that you respect Zeus's power over the skies and the weather. But that's not the only god Odysseus and his crew made upset. Remember when we talked about Odysseus outsmarting the Cyclops Polyphemus? Well, Odysseus couldn't help but brag about his brilliant strategery there, and that was a huge blunder. Why? Well, as it turns out, Polyphemus's dad is none other than Poseidon, god of the oceans. And just like today, nepotism was super helpful back in Greek times too. But on top of that, Poseidon was also the god god of earthquakes, droughts, and horses for some reason. I guess he just thought they were neat. So to make it up to Poseidon for stabbing his son's eye and to stay on his good side, I'd recommend making sacrifices of bulls, horses, and dolphins. Pine trees and celery were also said to be sacred to Poseidon. Again, interesting combo there. So maybe carry some of those potted plants around with you, huh? And finally, there's the Titan Aeolus. He was one of the original 12 Titans and was the sacred keeper of the winds. Again, a very useful ally to have for sailing. And he actually did try to help Odysseus out after the king told him everything he wanted to hear about the world outside of the Titan's island home. So yeah, if you ever run into him, do that. He's also associated with the kingfisher, so offering him up that animal will also help you get in his good graces. And that right there, my friends, checks the most critical box for surviving the Odyssey. By monitoring the hubris and the pride of yourself and your crew and appeasing the gods who set you out on this journey in the first place, you can actually use your knowledge of navigation and warfare and mythical monsters to get you home on the right schedule. Maybe if Matt Damon followed these rules, the movie would just be about 10 minutes long, so not as interesting, so, huh. Either way, remember that it's all just a theory. A film theory. And cut. Up next on Film Theory.
This is not a drill. Get to a safe distance.